In this lesson, we're going to set up our final render. If you'd like to follow along, please go into Chapter 11 in your Working Files folder and select the model named Final Model. So we have our model all completed. We have all of our materials and lighting the exact way we want them. So we're just going to go to my project settings by tapping the space bar. And I just want to kind of double check a few things, make sure I've got my ray bounces set. I'll probably turn that up to 8 just to give myself a little higher quality here. And ground shadows, although they look good here, I'll just make that a 2 just to increase the quality of those. I know my renderings aren't going to take too long with this particular item, so I don't mind turning those up just a little bit. I'll make sure that self shadows and global illumination are on. And that gives me sort of a nicer quality to my renderings. And then I'm going to click to lock my aspect ratio. And what that's going to do is going to lock my renderings to this particular aspect ratio. And I'm strictly doing that. Typically, I would probably go to more of a portrait kind of a view for this screen, but because of how we're recording the screen, I'm just going to keep it with a full screen resolution here. Now notice there are some presets under your screen sizes here. So you've got US letter, US tabloid, you've got A4 and A3 paper, you've got 16:9 or high def kind of resolution, or the old standard television kind of squarish looking resolution, or you have actual resolutions based on numbers. And those are all presets that are actually going to adjust the size of this window while we're working. The thing you need to be careful of with those is if you've got your camera all set up to a nice view, if you adjust the aspect ratio of your background or your window, then you may find your zooms are just a little bit different. So when we're ready to go in and set up a render, we just click on the render button here, and we have some different options. So under output, name our file. We can choose the location that it's going to go. I typically tend to use just the default location. We can choose our format. We have JPEG, TIFF, an EXR, or 32-bit TIFF, or a PNG file. I tend to like the PNG files. It gives me a very nice quality image, and it lets me have transparency in the background. All of this area will render as transparent when I open the file in Photoshop, and I'll get my main data, and I do get my shadow. The shadow can be a little tricky to use with transparency, but it's not too hard to control once you get in there. And then we have all of our resolution settings. Now, the most important thing to know before you change any of these is you want to know what your final DPI or dots per inch that you need to output this at. And the reason for that is if you set all these to the sizes you want and then change your DPI, it'll change these. So you want to change your DPI first. So let's say I need a 300 DPI image, which is fairly standard for print production. Notice once I click out of this window and click over here, you'll see these sizes change. So now what was 8 inches across to get to a 300 DPI now has to shrink down to 2.666 inches. So now I've got my 300 DPI. If I still need an 8-inch image, now watch when I click out of this 8-inch wide image, look what happens to my resolution. So right now it's at 800. So now in order to give me an 8-inch by 300 DPI resolution image, I've got to render a scene that is 2400 DPI. So that's why it's important to set the DPI first. There are also some presets in here. So we have 1280, and that shows me, because I have 300 DPI selected, what my print size would be. Let's see if I change this to 96, still at 1280. Now I have an image that's 13 inches across. So that's the most important thing to really kind of concern yourself with. Quality we've already sort of looked at. I'm going to be using the advanced settings, so it's going to use whatever I have in my project tab there. Now the Q, this is only going to be available if you have KeyShot Pro. What this allows me to do is take a whole bunch of different views, or the same view, maybe I've got a few different materials applied, and just kind of add job, change the camera, change the lighting, hit add job, and I can have a whole stack of images all queued up. And then when they're all loaded in here, I can hit process queue, and then I can leave the room or let these render overnight, whatever I want to do. I don't have to sit and wait for each render to finish. So that is very nice. Again, it's only a pro setting thing though. Let me just move this view over a little bit, even though that's not my final view here. Now region render is really nice. Let's say I've got this whole image and I want to render it. And then I want to do a second one, and maybe I want to change this bezel here to a different color. I can go ahead and change that, and instead of having to render the entire thing again, as long as my camera angles are all the same. And that's another reason to save your camera angle so you can lock it when you do your renderings. If I click on Region Render, now I can drag this little box. And anything inside this box, when I send it either to the queue or to hit render, will render. Anything in this darker gray area will not render. So now I don't have to wait all that time. Again, if I'm in the advanced mode, if I'm in maximum time, it's still going to go my maximum time. But now just this region is going to render, so it can really save a lot of time. Network rendering, if you have a network plugin, that's an additional upgrade. That allows you to use any computer that's on your network. You can use the processing power from those computers, so that can really, really speed up your renderings. It can also really, really slow down your neighbor's computers, so it's probably something, if you're going to do it, you do kind of after hours or overnight. Passes, we have some different passes here. The two that you'll probably use the most are Clown Pass. Let me switch region off and go back to our passes. So Clown Pass, what that'll do is every single item in our scene tree will get just this sort of nasty kind of bright color on it. And that allows you to use an eyedropper tool or the magic wand tool in an image processing program like Photoshop to select different parts of your model if you need to select them individually instead of having to draw around to select each part. And then Render Layers lets us take each part of our model and assign it to a layer in KeyShot. And then when your render completes, you'll get one image of your entire rendering, and then you'll get individual images of any of the parts you've assigned to layers just by themselves floating on transparency from the exact view you see, only just the parts that you'll see in this particular angle. So that can be really helpful if you need to make some adjustments or change some things out. Again, sort of more of a post-production kind of a thing, something you might do in Photoshop. So let's see, I've got my final model. I've got my quality. Let's set that to 32. My shadows at 2. My ray bounces are 8. And everything else looks pretty good there. So I'm just going to go ahead and click render. Let me check my output. That I didn't check. Okay, my render size is pretty good too. So I'll just click render. And I'll bring that window back in here, and now you can see it. So notice it starts out with very large squares and just sort of reses those up as it's working. It's refining those details all the time. Now if you notice, it's telling me up at the top here how long the rendering has taken so far. It's also telling me how much memory it's using and how many cores of my computer I'm using. I have KeyShot set to use all 12 cores for my machine. So if you've got a brand new machine with 32 cores or something crazy like that, these renderings are going to go much faster. If you have something a little less, 8 cores or so, then your renderings will obviously take a little bit longer. You can also tell it to not use all the cores. So if I wanted to leave myself 2 cores so I could work on other things while these renderings are going on, then I can do that. I just need to know that I can continue to work on other things, but my renderings will take longer to finish. So my rendering took 2 minutes and 9 seconds with those settings. Those last couple of blotches will clear themselves up. Right now it's just saving the file off to my network. There we go. It dings when it hits 100 to let me know it's finished. And it gives me my final render time with everything included. So that was 2 minutes and 53 seconds for that rendering. And that concludes our look at setting up a rendering.